This truth makes most men deeply uncomfortable because it feels unfair at first glance. Women often crave men who don't even value them. Not cruel or abusive men, but emotionally unavailable, detached, seemingly indifferent to the idea of losing them. And the more a man creates distance, the more intense her desire becomes. This confuses men on a profound level because everything they've been taught says the opposite. Be attentive, be consistent, be emotionally available. Show her she matters. Value her openly. Yet when men do exactly that, attraction often fades instead of growing. So what's really happening here? The answer has nothing to do with arrogance, manipulation, or mistreating women. It has everything to do with perceived value and emotional positioning. Women don't desire men who don't care. They desire men who don't need. And need is the silent killer of attraction that most men never see coming. When a man overvalues a woman, he unintentionally places her above himself. His mood starts depending on her responses. His confidence fluctuates with her attention. His identity slowly begins revolving around keeping her interested. And the moment that happens, desire shifts shape, because desire is rooted in uncertainty, contrast, and emotional freedom. The more predictable a man becomes, the less emotionally stimulating he is. Security replaces excitement. Familiarity replaces intrigue. Attraction quietly dissolves. That's where the paradox appears. A man who doesn't overvalue a woman maintains emotional independence. He enjoys her presence but doesn't cling to it. He values her but doesn't center his life around her approval. And that emotional distance creates space. Space creates curiosity. Curiosity becomes desire. This is why women often feel drawn to men who seem less invested. Not because those men are superior, but because their emotional self-mastery signals strength. They aren't desperate to be chosen, they aren't terrified of loss, and the absence of fear of loss is magnetic. This video isn't about becoming cold. It isn't about neglecting women. It isn't about pretending not to care. It's about understanding why overvaluing someone lowers your perceived value, and why emotional independence naturally creates attraction. If you've ever wondered why the more you cared, the less interested she seemed, why pulling back suddenly changed her behavior, or why some men attract effortlessly without trying, this video will explain the psychology behind it. And if you stay until the end, you'll understand why the men women desire most aren't the ones who ignore them. They're the ones who never abandon themselves for them. Section 1. Desire is triggered by emotional positioning, not effort. Most men believe desire is something you earn through effort. They think the more they give, more attention, more reassurance, more emotional availability, more consistency, the more attractive they become. But desire doesn't operate on a reward system. Desire is triggered by emotional positioning. High-value men understand this instinctively. They know attraction forms not because a man does more, but because he positions himself differently relative to a woman. His emotional center stays rooted in himself, not in her reactions. When a man overvalues a woman, something subtle but powerful occurs. His energy becomes reactive. His decisions start orbiting her mood. Without realizing it, he communicates dependency. Dependency erodes desire. That's why effort without self-respect backfires. It tells a woman your emotional stability rests on her presence. And once she feels that message, attraction changes form. High-value men never place women at the center of their emotional world. They enjoy the connection, but don't build their identity around it. They have direction, purpose, and internal validation that exists independently of romantic attention. That independence is what creates attraction. Women desire men who are anchored in themselves because that anchoring signals security and strength at the same time. Not boring security, but solid security. That's the paradox most men miss. When a man stops trying to secure desire, desire often appears. When he stops chasing emotional closeness, closeness becomes intriguing. And when he no longer fears loss, he becomes harder to replace. High-value men don't withdraw to manipulate. They simply refuse to overinvest. They don't prove their worth. They assume it. That assumption changes everything. A man who values himself first doesn't feel the need to convince. His presence feels optional, not desperate. And optional presence feels powerful. That's why women often desire men who seem less invested, not because those men don't care, but because they care without attachment. Attachment creates pressure. Pressure kills desire. High-value men eliminate pressure by staying emotionally centered, and emotional centering is the foundation of attraction. Section 2. Overvaluing a woman silently places you beneath her. Overvaluing a woman rarely looks dramatic. It doesn't start with begging or pleading. It shows up in small, almost invisible shifts most men never notice until attraction is already gone. He replies instantly every time. He rearranges his schedule without question. He tolerates behavior he'd normally reject. He prioritizes her emotions over his own boundaries, and he does it all believing he's being caring and emotionally mature. But emotionally, something else is happening. When you overvalue a woman, you elevate her position above yours, not with words, but with behavior. And attraction responds to behavior. High-value men understand desire is influenced by perceived hierarchy. When a woman senses you're more invested in keeping her than she is in keeping you, the dynamic flips. She becomes comfortable, and comfort without admiration leads to indifference. That's why women often lose attraction without being able to explain why. They don't wake up deciding to desire less. Their nervous system simply responds to the shift in balance. Overvaluing removes tension. Tension fuels desire. High-value men maintain tension not by being distant, but by being self-mastered. They don't abandon themselves to maintain closeness. They don't sacrifice standards to avoid conflict. They don't chase reassurance when energy shifts. Most men confuse emotional availability with emotional capitulation. High-value men draw a clear line between the two. They're open but not dependent, present but not attached, interested but not invested beyond reason. That balance keeps attraction alive. When a woman senses your life would continue normally without her, her perception changes. She feels being chosen by you is meaningful, not guaranteed, and meaning creates value. That's why women often desire men who seem less invested. Not because those men are superior, but because their emotional position stays upright. High-value men never lower themselves to secure desire. They know the moment you value someone more than yourself, you cease being precious in their eyes. Section 3. Emotional detachment creates desire, not neglect. This is where most men completely misunderstand the concept and make the wrong choice. Emotional detachment isn't neglect. It isn't coldness. It isn't treating a woman like she doesn't matter. Emotional detachment is the ability to stay connected without becoming dependent. High-value men grasp this distinction. They can enjoy intimacy without clinging to it. They can value a woman without centering their self-worth around her reactions. And because of that, their presence feels light, calm, and non-demanding. That emotional lightness is rare. Most men bring emotional weight into interactions. They seek reassurance, look for signs, try to secure certainty. And that constant need for confirmation creates pressure. Pressure suffocates desire. High-value men eliminate pressure by remaining emotionally whole on their own. They don't wait to be chosen. They choose if someone fits into their already full life. And that shift in perspective instantly changes how they're perceived. A woman feels it before she can explain it. She senses his attention is intentional, not desperate. She senses his affection is genuine, but not fragile. And that balance triggers attraction on a deep level. That's why women often desire men who seem emotionally detached. Not because those men don't care, but because they don't need attention back to feel stable. Need creates imbalance. Balance creates desire. High-value men don't detach emotionally to manipulate. They stay detached because they've built an internal foundation that doesn't rest on romantic validation. They have purpose. They have direction. They have self-respect. And when a man possesses those things, his emotional availability feels like a gift, not a demand. That's why emotional detachment creates desire. It allows a woman to move closer to you freely without feeling responsible for your emotional state. And freedom is one of the most powerful drivers of attraction. Neglect pushes people away. Detachment invites them closer. High-value men understand this intuitively, and that understanding is what makes them quietly magnetic. Section 4. Why women chase what's optional, not guaranteed. Attraction shifts the moment a man feels guaranteed. It's uncomfortable to hear, but it explains a pattern men see over and over. The more available, predictable, and accommodating a man becomes, the less emotionally stimulating he feels. Not because he's doing something wrong, but because desire feeds on optionality. High-value men grasp this instinctively. They never make their presence guaranteed. Not by playing games, but by leading full lives that don't revolve around one person. Their time is structured. Their energy has direction. Their attention is selective. That selectivity creates value. When a woman senses a man's presence is optional rather than assured, her emotional system engages differently. She doesn't relax into complacency. She stays alert, curious, invested, not anxious, but aware. This is where most men go wrong. They believe consistency means constant access. They believe reassurance builds attraction. They believe availability equals commitment. But unlimited emotional availability removes uncertainty, and uncertainty is desire's fuel. High-value men offer consistency in character, not in constant presence. They show up aligned. They communicate clearly, but they don't overinvest. They don't chase attention. They don't make themselves endlessly available to feel needed. A woman feels that quickly. She senses his attention is earned, not automatic. She senses his interest is genuine, but not dependent. And that balance creates emotional attraction. That's why women often chase men who seem less invested. Not because those men are indifferent, but because their interest feels chosen, not obligatory. High-value men stay optional by holding their standards. If energy drops, he doesn't overcompensate. If effort becomes one-sided, he doesn't compensate. He lets the imbalance reveal itself. And when imbalance appears, he withdraws without drama. That withdrawal is powerful. It communicates self-respect. It restores polarity and reintroduces emotional movement where stagnation formed. Women don't desire men who guarantee permanence at the cost of self-respect. They desire men whose presence is precious because it isn't promised. High-value men never fear being optional because they know optional presence is what keeps desire alive. Section 5. Why men who value themselves first feel emotionally irreplaceable. A man becomes emotionally irreplaceable the moment he stops being the emotional backup plan in someone else's life. Most men try to become irreplaceable by being available, supportive, understanding, infinitely patient. They believe if they show enough loyalty and emotional presence, a woman will naturally value them more. But emotional value doesn't come from availability. It comes from self-prioritization. High-value men understand that how you treat yourself teaches others how to treat you. When a man values himself first, not selfishly but firmly, he communicates something powerful without words. He shows that his time, energy, and attention aren't unlimited resources. That scarcity creates meaning. A woman doesn't feel emotionally attracted to a man because he's always there. She feels attracted because when he is there, it feels intentional, chosen, deliberate. His presence has weight because it isn't automatic. That's why men who don't overvalue women often feel irreplaceable. They don't fight for emotional space. They occupy their own. High-value men don't fill silence to avoid discomfort. They allow space. They don't rush to reassure. They trust their position, and that trust creates emotional gravity. Most men fear pulling back because they think it signals disinterest. In reality, pulling back from overinvestment signals self-respect, and self-respect is deeply attractive. A man who values himself first doesn't chase reassurance. He doesn't fear being misunderstood. He doesn't need to prove his importance. He knows if his presence is valuable, it will be felt. That completely changes the emotional dynamic. Instead of asking, "Do you still want me?" the question subtly becomes, "Why is his presence different?" That difference is irreplaceability. High-value men aren't emotionally intense. They're emotionally anchored. They don't try to anchor themselves to someone else's attention. They're anchored in their own direction, and direction is attractive. When a woman senses a man would continue growing, evolving, and living fully, whether she stays or leaves, she perceives him as emotionally complete. Emotional completeness removes pressure, and when pressure disappears, desire has room to breathe. That's the paradox most men miss. Trying to be irreplaceable makes you replaceable. Being self-sufficient makes you unforgettable. High-value men don't ask to be valued. They live in a way that makes their value undeniable. And that's why women often desire men who don't overvalue them. Not because those men don't care, but because they care without losing themselves. Summary and final call to action. In short, the mistake most men make is believing desire is something they must earn by giving more, caring more intensely, or trying to be chosen. That single belief is what quietly pushes desire away. Women don't desire men who disappear emotionally. They don't desire men who play games. They don't desire men who pretend not to care. They desire men who stay whole. A man who values himself doesn't fear losing a connection because the connection was never the source of his identity. He enjoys closeness but doesn't cling to it. He offers presence but doesn't abandon standards to maintain it. That inner stability changes everything. When a man stops overvaluing a woman, he stops applying emotional pressure. And when pressure disappears, desire has space to breathe. Attraction returns to its natural rhythm, free of need and expectation. That's why women often feel drawn to men who seem less invested, not because those men don't care, but because their attention is pure. It isn't loaded with fear, obligation, or insecurity. High-value men understand that love doesn't mean losing yourself to be accepted. It means staying aligned and letting connection grow naturally. Whether a woman stays or leaves becomes secondary. The real victory is that the man remains intact. And when a man remains intact, he becomes attractive beyond any relationship. That's the truth most men never hear. The men women desire most aren't the ones chasing affection. They're the ones who choose themselves when love tries to uncenter them. And that choice is felt, not loudly, not immediately, but deeply.